Yo, dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the world. And what we've got here is a thing called correlation. I don't know if you look at the world besides over the peak, but these financial folk and investors are all on about correlation, correlation, correlation. And I don't take too much notice of it, just to note that they note it. And it's everywhere. You know, people don't do so much stock picking anymore, you know, picking a particular equity, because they know that if something goes wrong, the entire herd will go blah, 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 and sell your good equity along with everybody else's. It's just that everyone's realizing, with the world also interconnected, that nobody's really appreciating. Nobody's particular genius is taken notice of anymore. Only the herd movements are noticed. And it's the herd movements that are proposed or worked out in advance by these people investing to know what the future is going to be. How is the herd going to react to any particular thing? And it's almost irrelevant whether something's either good or bad. They're just working out how will the world herd react to this, that or the other. And it's the same in equities, bonds or whatever. That's enough of that. Right, this particular one is the Eurozone industrial new orders from Eurostat and the US manufacturing new orders. So you wouldn't really think that the amount of new orders for manufacturing or something would be so correlated for the United States and Europe, but it looks like it is. And that's just one manifestation of the correlation. There are correlations all over the place. It's kind of saying that this world economy thing that everyone goes on about is actually now a real reality according to reality. It's really out there. Things are horribly and dreadfully connected. And I say that because it means that it's not quite the butterfly effect, but if things go wrong, they've got the capability of going absolutely and horribly wrong, because it'll go wrong everywhere. And the only thing that kind of forces against that is if, say, it's a global banking problem that causes an equity crash, and people do have this huge quantity of savings money at the moment, where's it going to go? That's about the only thing that's holding things together, is this great huge ocean of cash that has to be put somewhere. Anyway, enough of that. You can see that these are correlated, seemingly, and the blue one, the Europe one, has really turned down. And what the implication here is, the Americans doing blah, you know, not bad, but will it be able to continue being blah when Europe's going ugh? And Europe isn't yet, but it's just having a bit of a problem. Anyway, let's move on. This one is from Morgan Stanley's put this data together. We think that European banks could delever 1.5 to 2.5 trillion euro over the next 18 months, but history suggests that over a longer time frame, 5 or 6 years, this could reach 4.5 trillion euro, assuming zero deposit growth, which is probable. Yeah. Anyway, even if it wasn't, it wouldn't damage this much. The pinky line at the top is when Japan had its great big falling. The green line, it goes down quicker. That's the Asian financial crisis, and that's because, you know, they were emerging markets and they were so much more fragile, and they really fell off a cliff. For comparison, the goldy line is the United States peaking in 2007 and are now deleveraging almost down. Well, they are down to the level that Japan and the Asian markets have got to, but that blue one is the horror show, and this is what the alarm is here. Ooh, that blue one. It's where it's the blue solid one at the moment, which is horribly, horribly, horribly high. And this is what the Americans have been saying for years. You know, you're looking at us, the bankers, you think we're bad. Have a look at those fucking Europeans. And they are horribly bad, the European banks. And they haven't even started this deleveraging process, and they can't, obviously, because of all these regulations and the fact that they just can't. They can't. but they'll have to do it slowly, and it's not going to do anybody any good, obviously, banks deleveraging. But you can see how far they are behind. If you didn't know, the American banks weren't lying all the time when they were saying, don't look at us, look across the Atlantic to Europe. That's where the horror show is. Right. Interesting this, that China bars airlines from EU carbon tax. You know, Merkel and people are on the phone. Actually, I think she went over again, didn't she, to China to try and get some money to bail out Europe. But in the background, they say, yeah, well, we'll look into it, whatever. And in the background, they go, well, we're not going to take any notice of your airline carbon tax at all. Sod off. And that's quite a big move by China. They maybe are now starting to muscle their way into the world. Now, first video back, I was trying to keep it short, but I'm a bit blathery today, so I get the idea that China is doing this because it's all the time that I've been watching, they've always been reticent about this. We're now the new kid on the block. They're always in the background. They never push themselves forward. They really don't. And I think they're only doing this is because they know the figures in the background in China, and the figures in the background in China are not clever at all. And they're now bluffing. I think that they're now starting to pretend to throw their weight around because they know in actuality what's happening behind them is looking very shaky indeed. But that's just mystic thinking. That's not, I can't get you an article to validate that. But the whole China economy is looking dangerous. Right, over in Europe, which is, it's amazing, isn't it? It is pathetic. And, well, this patheticness is summed up by this Der Spiegel article. And I know Der Spiegel isn't exactly what you might call the creme de la creme of news reporting from Germany. But I imagine it represents a good swathe of German opinion. And this headline, it's time to end the Greek rescue farce. And it's the farce word in there that's the important one. And the whole article goes on, not really politically, but just kind of frustratedly showing the German thinking on this, that we do not want to be involved in this farce anymore. It is a farce. We're Germans. We're efficient. If you let us clear it up, we would clear it up efficiently. But we've got to deal with all you idiots, and you lot are turning it into a farce. And quite frankly, that's probably representative of an awful lot of German thinking. They are sick of the whole mess that this Europe thing is turning itself into. It's an embarrassment, and the Germans don't like to be embarrassed. Okay, it finishes with this. All this would be very expensive. It's said, you know, this is what you're doing, basically, is just talking about things. You're not really solving the problem. We wouldn't mind solving the problem, but you're not. You're just talking, and including Merkel in it. You're just talking. You're not getting anything done. It's not efficient. All this would be very expensive, and German taxpayers would also be forced to do what they have feared from day one to do, which is to pay for Greece, which I think if they thought it was efficient, they would agree to. But this solution has two major advantages, the one that Spiegel's put forward. The payments would be limited, and they would actually help Greece. This is saying, I won't read the article, it's quite sensible. And unlike everything that has been negotiated up until now, the solution would also be worthy of being called a rescue package. It's accepting in fine black and white that all these bailouts and rescue packages for Greece are nothing of the sort. They are just covering cracks that are mainly not in Greece at all, they're elsewhere. And Greece is just being driven into destitution, which will only cause more fuss down the road. It's not, and nothing efficient is being done. Right. Bloomberg, Denmark's credit crunch worsening as retrenching banks spur vicious cycle. I only put this up because I don't know why Denmark is AAA and put forward as the, what do they call it, poster boy for being super. That, Denmark, very nice, But the whole thing about Denmark to me is just a very nice little joke. I don't know what it's all about. But obviously the markets think that Denmark is super. Mystically, I do not. Bloomberg again, similar looking thing, but this is from Intesa, an Italian bank. We'll read this quite carefully. The Intesa, the Italian bank CEO, says the ECB funds, that's the Eltro funds, to be used for credit, comma, purchase of Italian bonds. Now, I won't read this, or the whole article goes on to talk about Intesa and its buying of Italian bonds. Not a single word about the funds to be used for credit, comma. And this is getting to be a bit of a normal thing that I spot now all over the place. They say that these funds are to be used for credit, and then never say another word about it. And we know why, don't we? And I'm going to go one further, that I'm going to go from it's not unlikely that they'll use those funds for credit. I'd say they absolutely can't use those funds for credit. Not consumer credit lending anyway. They just can't do it. So what's that doing there? Anyway, enough of that. We'll finish with the world, because everyone seems to be getting quite happy that the world is recovering and everything is maybe turning up rosy. And a lot of the data shows that it's certainly not crashing, but it's in shockingly bad condition compared to what it used to be in the good old days. Across the top there, United States goes back further than anybody else. These looks like they're IMF charts. Back to 1957, and you've got nominal GDP increases, which we'll ignore because you've got to take inflation into account, so we'll go only with the real, which is the blue one after inflation. And we can see it's kind of, since 57, there's ups and downs, but certainly since 75, it's been wrapped around that 3% annual increase every year line until the Great Recession, and now it's down, and the forecast, these are old charts, as most IMF charts are, and it's blah, gone blah, yeah, blah. Germany, well below that 3% line, and has been all through the last decade, and is blah, no good at all, really, not good at all. France, well below the 3% line, but importantly now France is looking shakier and shakier. Italy has just gone from close to the 3% line and consistently going down and down and down, and is going to go negative any second, probably is negative. You could say that Britain was wrapped around that 3% line until the Great Recession, and now they're all the ones. Again, it's very difficult for Britain. I've got funny ideas about Britain. Some projections look good, but basically most of the things are pointing down towards that zero line, and that's no good. Canada's well below the 3% line, and we know Japan came from the 90s up there, and they're down here. What I'm saying here is the whole Western world is doing, if they're doing well, they're doing blah, and that surely is not good enough for the whole world economy, this interconnected global economy. If the big money buying powers, which are the consumers in these countries, their economies are doing less than blah, there's no buying power to buy the shit that the emerging markets are making, and then they'll drop back, and there'll be knock-on effects for that. It's the whole picture is very, very bleak indeed. There's just nothing. There is interconnected less than blah, and that is not a good picture for a very troubled economic world. I've finished. Bye.